Hey everyone, I'm super excited to share this interview with you. This is Vicki Goodwin, who is running for Lieutenant Governor of Texas as the Democratic candidate. She made it all the way through the primaries, and we're headed toward the general election. And we're here today to talk about the office of Lieutenant Governor and immigration and your candidacy and why all of this matters. And what I encourage listeners to do is to watch all the way through, because we're going to talk about how governor, lieutenant governor, Senate, all of this impacts policy, and it's a little wonkish, but it's important to understand. And we're also going to talk about stuff that's happening right now, breaking news, and how this is actually going to impact families on the ground. So thank you for coming here and talking to me about this really important issue in our state.
Thank you, Kate. I really appreciate you doing this video.
So let's just hear about you first. Tell us about you. I know you've been in the Texas Leg since 2018, passed a lot of important legislation, and now you've decided to go for the statewide office, which is brave.
Yeah, people often ask what got me to run for office in the first place, and it really has been my passion for public education, making sure every kid in the state has a good education so that they have a good opportunity. And after serving 4 terms in the legislature, I came to understand that really we need new leadership so incredibly badly. Our leadership is not taking us in the right direction, and so that's why I'm running for lieutenant governor. The lieutenant governor truly is the most powerful position in the state. I think oftentimes people assume that's the governor, but governor is executive, lieutenant governor is legislative. And that's where you can really solve the problems of the day, is through legislation, through policy. That impacts people's daily lives more than they really understand, particularly when it comes to immigration.
Yeah, so, and this is something to understand what Vicki's talking about here. Lieutenant governor is the head of the Senate.
Right.
And sets committee assignments, sets the calendar, is really the boss of what comes out of the legislature in session. And that is incredibly powerful, that office. Can you talk about some of the ways that Dan Patrick, as lieutenant governor, has used his immense power to set bad immigration policy that has impacted our lives here in Texas?
Yes, all the things that we've seen over the last 12 years, essentially, that while he has been lieutenant governor, have been making it more difficult for our immigrant community with the Show Me Your Papers law, which allows law enforcement to pull people over. They can racially profile now. That's a law that we passed under Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Yeah. So he's really moved us in the direction same as what Trump has done to, detain and deport immigrants, even those who are going through the process legally. We also make the process incredibly difficult, as you know. The rules seem to often change, and people who are going through the process of seeking asylum, for example, are doing all the right things, are still being impacted, detained, deported, pulled away from their families. And this is all under Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. While obviously this is federal, the Lieutenant Governor does have an impact on what we do here in the state of Texas.
It's so painfully, I feel that in my body, because of all of the families that I talk to every day who are impacted by the Show Me Your Papers law. You call it the SB4, the creating a state crime for illegal entry, the forcing cooperative agreements with sheriffs, which is why we're seeing this just insane uptick in immigration enforcement. And what I see in my practice is that people get pulled over by DPS or sheriffs, and it's always the same story. It's, your seatbelt was wrong, or your window tinting was too dark, or your license plate was crooked, some pretextual, ridiculous thing. And people are taken from their families. And I've actually talked to several families where the children were left behind on the side of the road in the car.
Wow.
And this, sort of like big Capitol building with all this, people banging gavels and policy and stuff that can get less interesting if you're not into that stuff, really at the end of the day is devastating, heartbreaking consequences. And in fact, this week, the week that we're talking right now, we had a murder. at the hands of ICE in Houston, and Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, who is a man from Mexico. He's been in this country for 35 years and hasn't to this point been able to get legal status. He was in the process, but I'll just note, this is not a lieutenant governor thing, but like, he should have been able to get legal status by now. But he was in the process, picking up his crew, his construction crew, and was apprehended by ICE. And we now know they weren't even looking for him. They weren't wearing their body cam as they're supposed to do. There's enough video footage that we can see it really doesn't appear that he was weaponizing his vehicle, and they shot him dead in the street.
It's horrific. It's horrific what is happening as a result of, again, our policy at the state level of this cooperation, but also not pushing back against what ICE is doing, not saying, hey, in Texas, we are going to make sure that you're wearing your body camera, that you are doing things the right way, that you are only going after criminals that have a criminal history. That's not what they're doing.
Right.
And as a result, we're seeing families being traumatically harmed, horrifically killed. That's just unacceptable.
And it's really important that all of us start working really hard to elect statewide leaders that will not tolerate this, because Texas is kind of ground zero for doing whatever Trump wants and Stephen Miller wants. I mean, you look at Project 2025 and it's a playbook, and we are happy to implement it here in Texas. And that's because of Abbott and Patrick and Paxton and what these guys are up to. And what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it?
As lieutenant governor, things would be very different in the Texas legislature. As lieutenant governor, I have the ability to assign senators to committees, to leadership, make sure policy is prioritized, make sure that we are looking at what is happening in the immigration community. And, oftentimes people will say, this is federal. What can you do at the state level? But we often pass laws at the state level that won't be implemented until the federal government takes action. But it sends a signal. It sends a signal to our federal partners that this is what Texas wants. So we certainly can undo the law that forces local law enforcement into these 287G agreements, because we've seen that that is making our communities less safe. We have seen example after example of where when that cooperation is happening, it's not helping our communities. Local law enforcement is meant to protect and make our communities safer. And so we need to undo the 287 agreements. And that's something we can do at the state level. We've actually had representatives that have filed legislation to come up with some sort of a work permit system here in Texas. But those bills have never gone anywhere. That is something I would prioritize to, again, make sure that we can have the workforce that we need here in Texas. We have businesses that will say quietly, we need the workers. And so,
or loudly. They'll say it. Some of them will say it loudly.
But I feel like not loudly enough.
I agree.
Right now.
Yes, I agree.
But we can change the law at the state level. Some will have to wait for the federal government to do their work. But some of the things we can do here in the state, we have also, we can say the state is going to implement or enforce the Flores Agreement.
Yes. Yes, ding, where's a bell? I need to ring it.
We are not supposed to be keeping children in detention more than 20 days maximum.
Yes.
We are supposed to be providing them with certain things if they are detained. We are not supposed to be separating families. All those things. We can say, as a state, we are going to make sure we're enforcing the laws and the agreements that we have in place.
When in fact, and this is like my issue, I've been doing immigration law for 20 years, and as a law student, I went to the first family detention center and I saw a baby in a onesie that was issued by the prison. And I was like, what is happening? How are we detaining children? And it's mind-boggling just to imagine it in your brain. It's so much worse when you see children in prison and they're suffering. Yeah. And now we have huge family detention centers in Texas. We have Carnes and Dilley. And then we have what's called unaccompanied children who aren't detained with their parents. And many of them, 90% of them have families here in this country, but they can't get released to them. The latest news is that Texas is opening a detention center for unaccompanied children to facilitate more rapid deportation. And the latest I've heard is that the state is getting involved in taking contracts from the federal government to run these facilities and detain these children. I mean, this is like breaking news, but I am happy to hear you talk about the Flores settlement and the detention of children and the state's role in pushback against that, because for whatever reason, Texas is the place that they come to. It's like the detention, torture of children mecca.
And what a horrible thing to be known for.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Texas is known for a number of things that I don't think we should be known for. You know, the largest number of women dying in childbirth or postnatal. So, you know, there are some things that we need to change here in this state. Certainly, we shouldn't be known for the state that detains children.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, you have your work cut out for you. And I think that this, you know, 287G is just some number that gets tossed around, but really what it means is that local law enforcement is doing the bidding of immigration.
Right.
And it means, to your point and what you said, nobody's safe.
Right.
And our immigrant community is not safe interacting with law enforcement. That means witnessing crime, victims of crime, driving down the road, interacting with law enforcement, campus police, like all the ways that we need for public safety to feel safe with our helpers, with our law enforcement. And my experience has been, you know, when I go to these committee hearings and talk to leaders of law enforcement agencies, is that most of them are not in support of these agreements. They don't, leaders of sheriff's departments and police departments, campus police, they don't want to be enforcing immigration, but the ledge has been forcing this down their throats for so many years. And here they are like, we need to have community policing and a good relationship with our community, and
Definitely.
we cannot when the legislature is doing these 287G agreements and these other cooperative agreements.
Yeah, they have a lot of work to do as it is. The sheriff's departments around the state are already stretched thin, and so now we're saying you have yet another responsibility that your people aren't trained for, essentially.
Yes, and now the SB4, it not only does it enforce these agreements, but it creates a state crime for illegal entry. And now we're forcing judges. There's going to be a whole deportation scheme. I mean, it's going to be a logistical nightmare,
right?
Not just a constitutional and human rights nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that there's not enough judges to process all the cases, that there's a backlog, and that's part of the problem. But we also haven't updated our immigration laws in forever.
Yes.
And we, you know, I just think back to my grandparents and past generations immigrating here was so much easier. And people say, do it the legal way. Well, the legal way has changed. It's become much more difficult. I hear the stories about how long it takes, how expensive it is, how the rules change constantly. That's a lot for people to maneuver while they're trying to raise families, while they're establishing businesses, while they're going about their daily lives. They're trying to juggle a system that we've made impossible for them.
Absolutely. And I mean, what we're talking about is the humanitarian angle and how this impacts families. And I also want people to understand there's an economic angle to all of this. You know, when we as a state are going after immigrants, our economy is suffering in every sector, you know, construction, hospitality, tech, innovation, all the ways that we thrive, healthcare.
A lot of caregivers, a lot of immigrants are caregivers for elderly or children, you know. They really provide a lot of the economy. They provide a lot of the workforce, and we are harming ourselves and we're treating people horribly. So, you know, I recently had the opportunity to meet a teacher up in the Dallas area whose husband was detained and then sent out of state. So she ended up, because he was no longer able to provide, she had to sell her home, and she's had to leave work quite a bit so that she can just go and see him and keep up with the case. And it's, you know, this is devastating to people. We don't always think about the humans that are involved when we're passing laws, but I think people need to really recognize that this is harmful to so many people in the state of Texas and throughout the country.
Well, I am all for bringing some humanity into the office of Lieutenant Governor. I'm so glad and grateful that you are running. As you know, I had my own campaign for state rep, and I lost in the primary, but it's a whole thing running for office. The ultimate putting yourself out there, and it takes a lot to do it, and I'm glad and thankful for you. And for those of us who are in agreement about that, what can we do to support you, help you get your word out there? Because this is an important stretch coming up.
I appreciate that. It's all about voting in October, early voting in October, and on November 3rd, Election Day, telling your friends. We see there's a lot of corruption and we don't have tight campaign finance laws. So the current lieutenant governor has amassed quite a bit of money. We may not be able to match that amount of money. So it's really going to be a grassroots effort of people telling their friends who I am. Vicki Goodwin running for lieutenant governor. This is an incredibly important position. So anyone that's able to help, volunteer, donate, all of that will help us get past the finish line this November.
Thank you so much. Yeah, don't sleep on Lieutenant Governor, guys. Runs the Senate. That is a big deal. That's kind of what we're getting at here. So this is our gal. Thanks for coming and talking to us today, Vicki.
Thank you.